You're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
Hi, I'm Joe Iconis.
And I'm Jennifer Ashley Tepper.
And on today's episode, we're talking about my song, Norman.
This song on the album is performed by the one and only Lance Rubin, frequent Iconis collaborator, and he just sings the crap out of it. He's been singing this song for like a decade, and it gets better every single time, which we just praise Lance on this episode, basically.
Yeah, he's a really, really brilliant artist. He's a brilliant writer, a brilliant musician, and a brilliant actor, and a gentle and generous lover. And his interpretation of this song is very stunning. I hope you like it.
We all get a little sad sometimes.
Norman!
That's his name. Don't wear it out.
This song is so great. Sung by the great Lance Rubin.
Yeah. The song I wrote for a Halloween show at the Beechman. And it is inspired by the movie Psycho.
And it is, like many of your songs, it's like a person's name as a song, another theme.
Yeah, that's just, it's the name that's at the top of the page, the character name, and so that's the name of the song.
What year was it written?
It was written in 2000 and maybe it was 10. Maybe it was 2010.
I feel like it wasn't it first performed like at the Duplex at the same time as like around the Blood Song time? No?
It was performed at that Duplex show.
But it wasn't its premiere.
I don't think it was its premiere. I think I premiered it at Halloween.
You're right.
And then I think that performance that Lance did at the Duplex, right? That was the first time that someone other than me had sung.
Yes, that
and
makes
so it
sense.
hadn't been performed since I did it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad we went on that journey together.
What was your way into this song? Like maybe we should talk about this because like I'm sure there's a lot of different answers, but like you don't typically write all of your songs from the beginning. Like sometimes you start with the chorus, sometimes you start with a hook, sometimes you start with some random lyric idea. Like where did this song start, I guess?
This song started with the idea of wanting to write a song that was from the point of view of Norman Bates, but in a way that was like a sort of like throwbacky love song. Like, so it was like sort of, the kernel was like, oh yeah, I want to write a song for this character. And not sort of like tip my hand about who the character turns into.
Right.
It's like allowing him to have this like, this sort of like flash of romance. And, obviously specifically about Norman Bates, but I'm so fascinated by like, I'm sure that Jeffrey Dahmer, like there was probably a moment in his life where he saw, some kid like jumping rope and was like, oh, that's cute. And like genuinely had that thought, like not in a like way that is like, I want to murder that kid. Just like, oh, that's cute. Like, I think that it's like, the whether they're real people or fictional characters, I just don't believe that like people are all bad or all insane or all one thing. Right. There are these moments of whatever. And so I love the idea of like using a character that people know from pop culture and sort of exploring that idea. And it's like, and it's funny because we, sort of know Norman Bates as a killer, and we know that he, spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen Psycho, which you should, but we know that Norman kills Marion. And but I think that, before that, it's like, I do think that he clearly likes her, in Psycho. He's clearly intrigued by her in a way that feels, whether it's sexual or whatever, I don't know, but it feels like he has a little crush on her, which feels, romantic. And so I just wanted to write for that moment.
Yeah. Do you feel like as a writer, it's a hard line to toe because, obviously in like the great stories about people who murder or people who commit terrible crimes, it's like we are even more horrified, or we can understand even more about the character because they're not one-dimensional. It's not like this is an evil character. You're painting a full picture of someone they have a crush on, or maybe they saw someone jumping rope and felt like it was cute. Yeah. But there's this thing that happens where people misinterpret sometimes and are like, oh, you're writing something that makes us sympathize with a killer or makes us on their side in some way. How do you like navigate that as a writer when obviously you're not like, I condone this person murdering this person, but you need to write the character in such a way so that it reflects what we're seeing in society, or it is a real person.
Yeah. I mean, it's the answer is that that's just tricky. It's just hard. But I think that if you're writing a character, it's not real life, and if you're making a piece of art, whether it's a song or a musical or a movie or a TV show, whatever, I think that you're only gonna serve everyone better if you write each character with empathy, even the worst ones, because something happened to any of these people to make them what they are, and that something could be however they were born and their DNA, but it more than likely there's things that happen to them in their lives that turn them into however we know them, or if we know them by the worst thing they ever did, things led to that didn't just happen, and so I think that it actually feels more respectful to me to anyone involved, to everyone involved, to paint each character, both the perpetrator and the victim, with the appropriate amount of honesty and authenticity and empathy. Which doesn't mean that I'm not condoning or siding. I'm just trying to give a full picture. Yeah. Just because, and it's the idea of this actually is something that's specifically hard in musicals, because people still, as soon as you have a character sing, there's something a little silly about that. And even people who love musical theater or love opera, whatever, there's still this tiny hurdle you have to get over, and this tiny suspension of disbelief that you have to get over in a way that you just don't in a movie or even sometimes in a straight play. And so you can have, movies that are about whatever, killers or terrible, people, or you can have Hitler. A movie about Hitler, and it could be a very serious movie, and and he's been in a lot of movies. That man who was a real life monster, and you can look at it, and people can talk about it, and we can talk about how we're examining Hitler's psyche and whatever we want to do, and you can have a play about him and seriously talk about it, and you could probably even have an opera about him where he's singing music in a foreign language or whatever, and it feels sort of distant, and it's like serious art. But as soon as you would put Hitler in a musical and got him singing anything that even slightly resembled, contemporary or golden age musical theater, it is something that people would lose their minds over, because it's like having characters sing their feelings automatically. It's empathy in a crazy way, even if you're intending it to not, and it's both immediate empathy, and there's something a little bit silly about it. So It's so easy to look at it and be like, oh, you're making this a joke, or there's.
Yeah, it's wrapping my head around that. It's also, I don't think it's just because of the perception of musical theater as silly. It's part of it, but even if you took that away, if someone is singing, you're automatically not just more empathetic, but it's almost like you're celebrating what the character's thoughts are. Or Sweeney Todd sings his big, whole reason why he's the killer he is. Right. And even if we don't approve of that, we're applauding, and we're we're hearing that character in a different way because it wasn't a monologue, because it was a song. And you're right. I feel like that's Hitler is a great example of a character that you couldn't write a musical and do the things you would do in a movie. Yeah.
And it's part of that is that I think that because of how it works, because of how music works, even if Epiphany and Sweeney Todd, even if it didn't end with a with a big final ending that had people applaud, you're engaging with it in a very elemental way, in a way that makes you complicit. It's
Right,
like whether
totally.
whether you want to be or not, it's more than just, it's more than just watching something and be like, well, I don't agree with what he's doing, but I understand how he got there. You are actively engaging in it because there's
Right.
music, and so you can't help, but there's a give and take, and so you're part of it. And so
Right.
I think that's a huge reason too, why I think it's in musical theater, it's especially hard
Yeah.
to write stuff like this without it feeling like you're condoning
Totally.
or celebrating.
Totally. Do you feel like that's been trickier with some songs than with others? Like talking about Norman, but also all these other songs that are based on characters that might be killers or, psychopaths, or do you feel like one of them was more difficult?
Yeah, I mean, the one of my song, and I have quite a few songs where people either, where either the singer kills somebody or gets killed, or there's a sort of unexpected bit of violence that happens in and around the song. The one that I think is mentioned the most to me is Kevin, that song. And I understand why it really, really upsets some people, because of the casualness with which that murder in that song it happens. But I think that's the point for me. And that's that's the point of the song. And as awful as it is, it's things like that happen, like people get killed and for no reason. And sometimes those people are women, and it's an awful thing. And, and I never want to exploit it, but I want to be able to use the things that happen in real life in my work for, dramatic purposes. And I can only hope that people, know the context, meaning, know me and what I've done and been trying to do for many years, and apply that to songs where, things like murders happen. But yeah, and I think it's it's in that song, it's the casualness that I think really upsets people.
Well, I think also with some of the songs, first of all, with some of them, you might know the property that it's inspired by. And so I feel like in that case, sometimes our brains, especially the first time you hear something, you see it on more of a remove a little bit because you're like, oh, this is Joe's version of that character I love or that story I love. And you're not as shocked by, oh, that's a murderer because you already knew it, if that makes sense. Whereas Kevin, an audience member hearing it for the first time, goes like, oh, I've never heard this before. I'm leaning in. This is a funny character. Oh, what are they going to do next? Oh my God, Joe, the writer, had them kill someone. As opposed to an adaptation.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And there's and that surprise, which is something that I love. I love listening to something or watching something, and then it takes a turn that I couldn't see coming at all. That's very thrilling to me. In again, musical theater especially, and this is something I've come up against so many times, when a lot of times when a left turn happens, people get really upset. And people feel like, you didn't tell me in the opening number that was going to happen. You didn't set this up.
The anti-Jerome Robbins.
Exactly, yeah, because we're so programmed to be like, we're supposed to get the rules of the thing, and that's how the thing is going to operate. And we know at the top that it's a singing contest, and at the end, someone's going to win. But it's like, as soon as you don't do that, it really unnerves people in such a funny way, in a way that does not happen in movies. In movies, it's like, when a movie has a great twist, that's the thing. That's the reason that it becomes a blockbuster sometimes. That's the thing that gets people excited. But in a piece of theater, especially musical theater, because you can do it in a play, but in a musical, it really has to, like, everything has to align in order for it to happen. Or in a song, like but it's that, I think, because it unnerves people, and especially with something like Kevin, where it's a character who people think is funny, or like the character is like just bad enough that they feel like, I feel so bad laughing at this. Then it like really pulls the rug out from under them when, oh, he's a murderer. So, so then it's like, I shouldn't have been laughing for those last, few minutes.
Is so hard. You're so right that with musicals, and well, this is a play rule, but the whole like Chekhov thing of like, if you see a gun in Act 1, it has to go off in Act 2.
Yeah.
I sometimes think about, like, I think this is one of the only shows that is able to do what we're talking about and surprise the audience. Is like, you're in town when the twist happens and you're like, oh wait, like the good guys don't win, they're gonna die. This problem doesn't get solved, problem is unsolvable, the environment is a mess. Like all of the stuff that Urinetown manages to do, and then you know, by the, I guess, order of Broadway, like Broadway loved it. Like it was a hit. Like it's a show we still know today. They are one of the only shows that gets away with that in a musical, I feel like.
That's actually so right on. And it's shocking in Urinetown. It's shocking. It's insane. But it's like, I think Urinetown was able to like sneak by with it and still be embraced because it's like commenting on itself, you know, because it's like the Brechtian thing. And so it's like, we have the distance. It's we very purposely have the distance. So it's like we're looking at this thing as opposed to like feeling this thing.
Right.
You know? I'm trying to think of like other shows where the rules.
It's hard because I want that too, and I'm like, it is frustrating. Like, I don't want to always, if you see this in Act 1, it has to happen in Act 2. Like,
right.
I don't know. I think audiences do want to be surprised.
Yeah, and it's like also it's like I mean it's such a wacky thing. I remember when we did Rewrite at the Goodspeed at a festival of musicals, and we did a concert version of my show Rewrite there. And Rewrite is billed as a musical comedy triple feature. And so it's sort of, you think that you're seeing 3 disconnected 30-minute musicals. Mm-hmm. And then by like the end of the second one, you realize that they're connected. And then by the end of the third one, you realize that it's all sort of one big thing. It's all about a writer sort of writing his life instead of living it. And in a way that I mean, I liked it because I wrote it, but when there was a talk back, and the show did not go over well at Goodspeed Festival of Musicals. People liked parts, but on the whole, people were just like, what is this? What is this ridiculous thing? And there was a real sense of people being pissed off because their expectations were not met, because they
thought it was 3 separate
things. And then they were like, we didn't know that going in. And it was so real. And I think that was the first time I ever realized, like, oh yeah, this isn't cool for a musical theater audience.
But it's you're right. It's like, I mean, so many of my favorite, like Taylor Swift does it all the time. It's a pop album. You think they're standalone songs, and then they all connect. Yeah. It is something it's harder to get away with in musical theater.
Yeah.
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 It's also a reason why I think, like, this is true for me. Going into seeing an original musical, even if it does kind of do what's predicted, I always am kind of leaning forward, more excited, just because we don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. So it has like a riskier, like maybe something we just don't know if it'll take a left turn.
Yeah. No, you're totally right on.
That was a right turn. Getting back to Norman, I feel like Lance, well, first of all, we should talk about Lance Rubin, you know, writer, actor, extraordinary human being, and artist. He also is someone who's been with you for so many years and, you know, originated so much of your work. Yeah. He's just so freaking great on this track.
He's just so great. He's so funny, like such a truly, truly funny man. And he's so smart. As you said, he's a writer. He writes amazing novels, in addition to writing amazing musicals, like the one that he wrote with me, Broadway Bounty Hunter. But there's just something about, he's one of those actors that it's like all of these awesome things that he can do. And he's a great songwriter too, and he's a great musician. They all, I think, inform his abilities as an actor. I think that he is such a great generative artist that sometimes he forgets just how brilliant he is as an interpretive artist, and he can take material, whether it's words or songs or whatever, and he just makes it better. It's like he plumbs the depths of everything without having us see the work. It's like anything he looks at, he just immediately is going to go 10 layers deep, and then what you get is something that is so fully cooked, like the first time around. It's just incredible. And and his performance of the song is both heartbreaking and funny and really scary. It's all of those things, and they all coexist, and it's like those are things that should not work up against each other, and they just do. And it's because he's so good at finding the truth and the honesty and also the quirks of any character he plays.
Yeah. Do you think also, Lance is a writer, you're obviously a writer. Like, do you think that's similar for you when you sing something that you haven't written? Like if you're singing a musical theater song by someone else, like how do you think you come to that as a writer versus as someone who might be a performer solely?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, I think it's probably different for it is different for every writer because it's where your writer brain and then your performative abilities meet. But yeah, I mean, for me, I'm always like singing the subtext. I'm 100% lyric driven, like all of the time. Whereas, other writers who have better voices than I do probably look at things and they're like, oh great, there's a C and there's an E, and I know, like, they're just approaching it in a different way. Or they're like, oh, I'm going to tell the story of this through the music. And I'm always like, I'm going to tell the story of this through the lyric. And part of that is because I'm not a great singer. I think a very good performer, but I'm not a great singer. And so all of my stuff is like about the words and about the character and about the feeling. And where I think when stuff clicks with me, when I perform it, I feel like it's because I'm good at finding the sort of more extreme underpinnings in a lyric or in a character that might not seem to have that depth of whatever it is, anger or frustration or madness or something. I think that's where I kind of go to when I sing something, and I really like. I like the juxtaposition of those really intense, sort of like dirty, inner thoughts and sort of light and charming outer thoughts.
Totally. Yeah. Anything else about Norman? We've done some really fantastic sidebars on this episode.
Tons of sidebars, but that's like, that's what Psycho is.
Yeah.
Psycho is like literally, it's one movie for 45 minutes and then it takes a left turn and then it's literally another movie. It's the protagonist of the first third of Psycho is different than the protagonist of the second 2/3, and which is something that has been so inspiring to me. And also it's like, it gets back to what we were talking about earlier, like all of the sort of twists, that whole thing, like that, Psycho is a movie that I was obsessed with in high school and continue to be obsessed with. And it's for that. It's right. that idea of like, you think you're watching a movie that's about this person and it's actually not. And it is so thrilling to me. And the thing that kills me is that I was listening to a podcast because I do that now that we have a podcast. And the person was talking about how this movie called Razor's Edge, which I haven't seen. I'm going to watch. But she was like, there's a twist, and once you know the twist, the movie's never as good. Like if you watch it again, it doesn't hold up because it's just about the twist. Mm-hmm. And there's lots of movies like that. And Psycho is not like that. Like Psycho I think it gets better when you know that there's going to be a major narrative switch. And that's, I think, when I'm writing songs like this, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm actively trying to make them re-listenable, and like hopefully people will understand more about the song knowing what's coming.
Yeah, it's also, I don't even necessarily think people need to know what they're going to see in a musical or play before they see it. They just expect to, because that's what they always have done.
Right.
So it's like, if the expectation was ever reset by a show that managed to do that and be a big hit, something would shift maybe.
I think that what I want to do is I want to do a production of Mamma Mia where I get permission to rewrite the ending. And at the end of my production of Mamma Mia, what's the name of the mom? Donna?
Yeah.
Donna would lose her mind and murder those other two women.
Okay. I think that you're going to get a yes on that. I think licensing is going to say absolutely.
Yeah, and then the tagline could be, Mamma Mia, you already know you're going to be scared of it.
It would be called Mamma Mia Murders, and it would be done like...
Get ready for the murder scene.
Yeah. Norman.
Hey, thanks so much for listening or watching to my podcast. Do me a favor and go to wherever you just listen to or watch this thing and subscribe or like or give us a great rating or review, and then head to bpn.fm/album to find out even more information about this podcast, more ways to watch, more ways to listen, and check out my album. Thanks so much for hanging out.
Album Podcast is executive produced by Liz Armstrong, produced by Dori Berenstein, Alan Seals, Kim Garris, and the rest of the team at the Broadway Podcast Network. Be sure to visit bpn.fm/album for both audio and video versions of this podcast and to listen to Album.